Labour under fire. Farmers across the UK are gearing up for a massive showdown, and this time they're targeting Labour MPs in rural strongholds. Yes, folks, the sparks are flying as anger boils over the controversial inheritance tax changes introduced in Rachel Reeves's October budget. Farmers are taking a stand, claiming this family farm tax threatens their very existence. But before we dive into the explosive details, let's hear directly from one of the campaign's most vocal critics. Check out this clip of Clive Bailey calling out supermarkets for insulting farmers by offering food at shockingly low prices.
Keir Starmer was perfectly happy with the fact he's taken the winter fuel allowance away, the inheritance farm tax raid on farmers, of course. And I know you were particularly annoyed about a comment made by the Agricultural Secretary yesterday, Steve Reed. You told me, he said, "We know you're in it for the money." What's your take on the end-of-year report for Sir Keir Starmer when it comes to farming?
Yeah, good evening, Martin. Well, I think regrets, he really should have a few by now. As you just mentioned, he's pretty much worked his way through every sector of society. We've done pensioners, we've done farmers and family business with his changes to business property relief. The NIC's contributions, national insurance contributions, have hit retail and hospitality hard. The WASPy women and the pension issue yesterday. He's basically worked his way through every part of society, and alongside that, his chancellor seems hell bent on throwing our economy into the mother of all recessions next year. The way things are going. So yeah, he should have plenty of regrets, really. In fact, I think the only thing maybe he's achieved so far is something to add to his bucket list. He's at least got himself Christmas #1, hasn't he?
Well, let's see if that comes true. We'll speak to the creator of that later in the show, Chris Middleton. You put another story to my attention, and that is it's the time of year, of course, where farmers are hoping for a bumper payday. This is when everyone stocks up and all the essentials, the big turkey, the big shop should be putting money into farmers' pockets, Clive Bailey. You sent me a story yesterday, 15 pence. They're selling bags of seasonal vegetables, carrots, broccoli, Brussels sprouts at Tesco. 15p for a bag of vegetables. That presumably means you guys are making no profit whatsoever.
Well, yeah, this worsens, doesn't it? I mean, it was 15 pence yesterday. Today, apparently, plenty of the major supermarkets are at 8 pence for these kilos of sprouts, potatoes, parsnips. Now, that is... Make this really clear, that is way below the cost of production, way below it. So, I mean, they're almost giving this stuff away. And what it's doing, it's devaluing food. It's no wonder our government places absolutely no value on farming and no value on food when it's basically for free in the supermarkets. I mean, I've heard stories today about the farmers are actually going and buying these carrots and vegetables from the supermarkets in quantity because they can feed them to their animals cheaper than they can buy the feed for their livestock. It's ridiculous. It's making a nonsense of supermarkets say they want to help and support farmers, yet they constantly insult us by giving food such a low value.
Now, back to the real story. Labour's rural MPs are officially in the crosshairs as farmers launch their biggest wave of protests yet. The National Farmers Union, NFU, has announced a National Day of Action on January 25th, with tractor rallies and demonstrations planned across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. These aren't just protests, they're targeted strikes, aimed squarely at marginal Labour constituencies. NFU President Tom Bradshaw minced no words, describing the inheritance tax changes as destructive and a direct threat to Britain's farming heritage. He declared, "There is too much at risk. Our families, our future, our heritage. This policy undermines the sector that produces a safe, secure supply of British food." Farmers are fighting back with roadside banners strategically placed along major routes to remind Labour MPs of the fury brewing in their own backyards. This isn't just about taxes, folks. It's about a way of life under siege. The inheritance tax changes introduced in October's budget are at the heart of this brewing storm. Farms valued over £1 million now face a 20% levy on assets above the threshold. While this is lower than the standard 40% rate, farmers argue the policy is crippling. Farming groups warn it could devastate family businesses and spark a mental health crisis among older farmers unable to navigate the financial strain. Adding fuel to the fire, the government insists these changes only affect about 500 estates a year and offer a fair, balanced approach. But tell that to the 22 local councils, including Cornwall, Kent and Norfolk, that have already passed motions opposing the tax. These councils are piling pressure on newly elected Labour MPs, leaving them awkwardly wedged between their constituents' wrath and party loyalty. Labour MPs in rural constituencies are scrambling to contain the fallout. Many were already walking a political tightrope, balancing national party policies with local concerns. Now, with farmers mobilising and public sympathy squarely on the protesters' side, these MPs face a nightmare scenario. Public meetings in rural areas have turned confrontational, with constituents demanding answers and threatening to withhold their votes if Labour doesn't reconsider. Tom Bradshaw has praised the public for their solidarity, noting that the fight against this tax isn't just about farmers, it's about protecting the integrity of British food production and rural communities. He said the protests on January 25th would send a clear message to Labour. We will not be ignored. As tensions rise, the emotional toll on farming communities is becoming clear. Farming groups have warned of a potential mental health crisis as older farmers feel trapped, unable to pass down their estates without incurring huge tax liabilities. This, they say, is about more than money. It's about the emotional weight of losing a family's legacy. Meanwhile, Labour's leadership appears unmoved, doubling down on the need for the tax changes to fund public services. A government spokesman insisted that the policy was fair, adding, "For these estates, inheritance tax will be at half the rate paid by others, with 10 years to pay the liability back interest-free. This is a fair and balanced approach which fixes the public services we all rely on." But those words ring hollow for many. Farmers argue that the government's promises of support are empty, pointing to the ongoing struggle to stay afloat in a market dominated by supermarkets dictating prices. Clive Bailey's remarks in the clip resonate deeply with many in the farming community. They feel undervalued, overtaxed, and ignored by a political system that doesn't understand their challenges. Adding to the drama, Nigel Farage and Reform UK are using this moment to rally support in rural areas. Farage has been outspoken in his criticism of Labour's inheritance tax changes, framing them as part of a broader betrayal of rural Britain. With the Reform UK leader positioning himself as a champion of the countryside, Labour risks losing more ground to this resurgent political force. Polls in Scotland already show Labour losing voters to Reform UK and the SNP, and political analysts are warning that the trend could spread across rural England. Leading pollster Matt Goodwin recently described 2024 as a potential pivotal year in UK politics. According to Goodwin, Reform UK is poised to grow, capitalising on voter disillusionment with both Labour and the Conservatives. For Labour, the stakes couldn't be higher. The inheritance tax changes have turned what should have been a quiet winter recess into a full-blown crisis. With protests set to dominate headlines in January, the party faces a daunting question. Can it repair its relationship with rural Britain before it's too late? As farmers prepare their tractors and banners, one thing is clear. This battle isn't going away anytime soon. Labour's handling of the inheritance tax changes could define its standing in rural communities for years to come. Will they back down and revise the policy, or will they dig in and risk further alienating a key demographic? Only time will tell. In the meantime, the political landscape is shifting beneath our feet. Nigel Farage's growing influence, public outrage over Labour's policies, and a brewing mental health crisis in farming communities are all converging into a perfect storm. One thing's for sure, this story is far from over. So, if you want to stay up to date on this developing scandal and all the latest twists in UK politics, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and stay tuned. The January 25th protests are just the beginning, and we'll be bringing you every dramatic moment as it happens.